I'm David, a man who thought he had it all figured out. At 38, my life felt like a well-crafted blueprint finally coming to fruition. My wife, Emily, and I had been married for 12 years, and our home in the quiet suburbs of Maple Grove was a testament to our shared dreams. A cozy, two-story house with a wraparound porch, a garden she tended with obsessive care, and a garage where I tinkered with my vintage Mustang on weekends. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. Or so I believed. Emily was my anchor, the woman who laughed at my terrible puns, who left sticky notes with doodled hearts on my briefcase, who made our life feel like a warm, unbroken circle. Our daughter, Lily, was 10, a whirlwind of giggles and questions, and I'd have given anything to keep her world as bright as her smile. But life, as I'd learn, doesn't care about blueprints. It started with a feeling, a faint itch at the back of my mind. Emily had always been vibrant, her energy filling rooms like sunlight, but over the past few months, she'd grown distant. Not cold, exactly, but distracted. Her phone was always in her hand, her thumbs dancing across the screen in a way that felt secretive, not casual. She'd smile when I asked what she was doing, say it was just work, or a friend from book club, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine. I'd catch her staring out the kitchen window, lost in thought, her coffee going cold. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Her job as a marketing consultant was demanding, with late-night client calls and deadlines that seemed to multiply like roaches. I told myself it was temporary, that she'd come back to me, to us, once things settled. But the itch grew. It wasn't just her phone or her faraway looks. It was the little things, the ones you don't notice until they pile up. She started wearing perfume again, a sharp, floral scent she hadn't used since our dating days. She'd leave the house in outfits I didn't recognize. Sleek blouses, heels that clicked with purpose, a shade of lipstick that felt like it was meant for someone else's eyes. When I'd ask where she was going, she'd say a meeting or drinks with the girls, and I'd nod, wanting to believe her. But there was a rhythm to her absences, a pattern I couldn't ignore. Thursday evenings, she'd be gone until midnight. Sunday afternoons, she'd vanish for hours, claiming errands, but return with nothing. No bags, no receipts, just a faint flush on her cheeks. I wasn't a suspicious man by nature. Trust was the foundation we'd built, or so I thought. But doubt is a slow poison, and it was seeping into me. One night, after Lily was asleep, I sat in the living room, the TV muted, and watched Emily as she typed furiously on her phone. She was curled on the couch, her legs tucked under her, her face lit by the screen's glow. I asked, casually, "Who's got you so engrossed?" She flinched, just slightly, and locked her phone. "Oh, just Sarah," she said, naming her best friend. "She's venting about her boss again." Her laugh was too quick, too bright. I nodded, but my chest tightened. Sarah. I'd heard that name too often lately, a convenient shield for whatever she was hiding. The next morning, I did something I'd never imagined doing. I checked her phone. Emily was in the shower, the bathroom door ajar, steam curling into the hallway. Her phone sat on the kitchen counter, charging. My hands shook as I picked it up. Her passcode was Lily's birthday. I knew that much. I swiped, my heart pounding like I was committing a crime. The screen opened to her messages, and there it was, a thread with Sarah. But the messages weren't about work or gossip. They were intimate, playful, edged with a warmth that made my stomach lurch. "Can't stop thinking about yesterday," one said. "Your trouble, you know that?" Another read, followed by a winking emoji. The sender wasn't Sarah. The contact was labeled S, but the number wasn't one I recognized. I scrolled, my breath shallow, reading fragments of a conversation that wasn't meant for me. "Meet me at the usual spot," one message read. "Miss you already," said another. There were no explicit details, no smoking gun, but the tone was unmistakable. This was no friend. This was someone else. I set the phone down, my hands cold. The shower stopped, and I heard Emily humming, oblivious to the fracture she'd just caused. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but something held me back. Fear, maybe, or denial. If I spoke, it would make it real. Instead, I started watching her more closely. I noticed the way she'd angle her phone away when I entered the room, the way she'd blush at notifications, the way her excuses grew flimsier. One Thursday, she said she was meeting a client downtown. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and waited until her car pulled out. Then I followed her. I felt like a stranger in my own life, trailing my wife's silver SUV through the city. She didn't go downtown. She drove to a small coffee shop on the edge of town, a place we'd never been together. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Through the window, I saw her slide into a booth, her smile wide and unguarded. A man joined her, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair and an easy confidence. He wore a navy blazer, his movements relaxed but deliberate. When he touched her hand, she didn't pull away. When he leaned in, she laughed, her head tilting the way it used to when we were young and in love. I sat there, frozen, as they talked for an hour, their body language a language I no longer spoke. When they left, they walked to his car, and she kissed him briefly, but with a familiarity that gutted me. His name was Michael. I learned it later, piecing it together from snippets I overheard and a LinkedIn profile I found after some digging. Michael Carter, a real estate developer, 42, charming in that polished, predatory way. He wasn't a stranger. He was a client she'd mentioned in passing, someone she'd worked with on a campaign. I remembered her talking about him months ago, how sharp he was, how he got her ideas. I hadn't thought twice about it. Now every memory felt like a lie. The days that followed were a blur of rage and restraint. I didn't confront her. Couldn't. Not yet. I needed proof, something undeniable, because part of me still hoped I was wrong. I started tracking her movements, not with a detective's precision but with a husband's desperation. I checked her calendar, her emails when I could, even her car's GPS history. It was always the same: Thursday evenings at that coffee shop or a hotel downtown, Sunday afternoons at a park or a restaurant. Each discovery was a knife, twisting deeper. I stopped sleeping, my nights spent staring at the ceiling, imagining her with him, their laughter, their closeness. I wondered what he gave her that I couldn't. Was it excitement? Tension? Was I too predictable, too safe? The questions ate at me, but worse was the betrayal. Not just of our marriage, but of the life we'd built, the promises we'd made. Lily noticed the tension. "Are you and Mommy fighting?" she asked one evening, her eyes wide with worry. I forced a smile, ruffled her hair, and said, "No, sweetheart. We're just tired." But I was breaking inside. I couldn't let this destroy her world, too. I had to protect her, even if it meant swallowing my pain. But the pain demanded an outlet, and it was turning into something darker, something I didn't recognize in myself. I started imagining confrontations, not just with Emily but with Michael. I pictured his smug face, the way he'd touched her hand, and my fists clenched. I wasn't a violent man, but the thought of them, made me want to break something. I hired a private investigator, a decision that felt like crossing a line I couldn't uncross. His name was Greg, a gruff man in his 50s with a smoker's rasp and a no-nonsense demeanor. I gave him everything: Emily's schedule, Michael's name, the places I'd seen them. "I just need the truth," I told him, my voice shaking. He nodded, no judgment in his eyes, and said, "You'll get it, but be sure you want it." I wasn't sure. Not really. But I couldn't stop now. Greg worked fast. Within a week, he had photos. Emily and Michael at the hotel, her arm looped through his. Emily and Michael in his car, her head on his shoulder. Emily and Michael at a bar, their faces close, her hand on his thigh. The images were clinical, time-stamped, undeniable. Greg also gave me a report: dates, times, locations. They'd been meeting for at least 4 months, maybe longer. The hotel was a regular spot, a boutique place with a discreet staff. I read the report in my office, the door locked, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the pages. Each word was a confirmation of what I'd feared, and yet it still felt unreal, like I was reading about someone else's life. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat there, staring at the photos, my mind racing. I thought about our wedding day, Emily in her white dress, her eyes shining as she promised to be mine forever. I thought about Lily, asleep in her room, unaware that her world was about to crack. And I thought about Michael, this man who'd walked into my life and taken what was mine. The betrayal wasn't just Emily's, it was his, too. He knew she was married. He knew about me, about Lily, and he didn't care. That's when the idea of revenge took root. Not a fleeting thought, but a plan, cold and deliberate. I didn't know what it would look like yet, but it would be thorough. It would be cruel. It would make them both feel the weight of what they'd done. I wasn't just David anymore, the husband who trusted, who loved. I was someone else, someone forged in the fire of their betrayal. And I would make them pay. The days after receiving Greg's report were a descent into a kind of madness I didn't know I was capable of. I went through the motions of my life, waking up, making coffee, driving Lily to school, nodding at Emily's small talk. But inside, I was a storm. Every smile she gave me felt like a mockery, every touch a lie. I looked at her across the dinner table, her fork twirling spaghetti, her laughter at Lily's stories, and I wondered how she could live so easily with her secret. How could she kiss me goodnight, her lips soft and familiar, when hours earlier she'd been with him? The betrayal wasn't just a wound. It was a living thing, growing, twisting, demanding action. And action, I decided, was what I'd give it. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Confrontation would be too simple, too quick. It would give her a chance to cry, to explain, to shift the blame. No, I wanted something more. I wanted Emily and Michael to feel the kind of pain that lingers, the kind that reshapes you. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about violence or shouting matches. It was about precision, about stripping away what they valued most and leaving them to choke on the ashes. So I began to plan, and the planning became my refuge, a dark sanctuary where I could channel the rage that threatened to consume me. First, I needed to know more about Michael Carter. Not just his name or job, but who he was, what he cared about, what he feared. Knowledge was power, and I intended to wield it like a blade. I started with the basics, scouring the internet for every trace of him. His LinkedIn profile was polished, a showcase of his real estate empire, luxury condos, commercial developments, a string of awards for visionary leadership. His photo showed a man who knew he was handsome, his smile practiced, his eyes sharp. I found his company's website, his bio boasting of his commitment to community and innovative partnerships. There were articles about him in local business journals, praising his charm and ambition. But I wasn't interested in his public face. I wanted the cracks, the vulnerabilities. Greg, the private investigator, became my ally in this hunt. I met him at a diner on the outskirts of town, a place with chipped mugs and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. He slid into the booth, his leather jacket creaking, and handed me a folder. "This is what I've got on Carter," he said, his voice low. "You sure you want to dig this deep?" I nodded, ignoring the warning in his eyes. The folder was thick, a testament to Greg's thoroughness. Michael was divorced, no kids, living in a sleek downtown penthouse. He had a reputation for being a player, charming clients and colleagues alike, but there were whispers of ruthlessness. Deals that skirted ethics, competitors quietly crushed. He was a man who thrived on control, on winning. But he wasn't invincible. He had debts, not crippling but significant, tied to a recent project that had stalled. He had a temper, too, hinted at in a dismissed assault charge from years ago. And he had enemies, people he'd crossed in his climb to the top. The most useful piece was his route. Michael was a creature of habit. His life a series of predictable beats. He worked out at an upscale gym every morning, met clients at the same handful of restaurants, and spent his evenings at bars or networking events. Thursdays and Sundays, of course, were reserved for Emily. They met at the same hotel, the Willow Inn, or at quieter spots, a park, a cafe, once even a bookstore. Greg's photos showed them laughing, touching, lost in their own world. Each image was a fresh cut, but I forced myself to study them, to memorize their patterns. Knowledge was my weapon, and I was sharpening it. Emily, too, became a subject of my scrutiny. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. I watched her more closely, noting every change in her behavior. She was happier on the days she saw him, her movements lighter, her voice brighter. She'd hum while cooking, a habit she'd lost years ago. But there were cracks in her facade, too. Sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, her face would fall, her eyes distant, as if guilt was creeping in. I wondered if she ever thought about me, about Lily, about what she was risking. I wondered if she loved him. The thought made my chest ache, but it also fueled me. If she loved him, I'd destroy that love. If she didn't, I'd make her regret ever straying. The plan took shape slowly, piece by piece, like a puzzle I was assembling in the dark. I wanted to hurt them both, but in ways that would cut deeper than a fist or a shouted accusation. For Michael, it was about his reputation, his power. He was a man who lived for the spotlight, who needed people to admire him. I'd take that away, expose him as the fraud I knew he was. For Emily, it was about shame, about facing the consequences of her choices. I'd make her see what she'd thrown away, make her feel the weight of her betrayal. And I'd do it all without touching them, without breaking the law. My revenge would be clean, calculated, devastating. The first step was Michael's business. His latest project, a high-end condo development called Skyview, was his pride and joy, but it was also his Achilles heel. The project was over budget, delayed by zoning issues and supply chain problems. Investors were getting nervous, and Michael was scrambling to keep them on board. I started digging into Skyview, using public records and some discreet inquiries through a friend in city planning. There were irregularities, permits pushed through too quickly, environmental reports that seemed incomplete. Nothing blatant, but enough to raise questions. I contacted a journalist, a woman named Claire who wrote for a local investigative outlet. I posed as a concerned citizen, feeding her tips anonymously, pointing her toward the cracks in Michael's empire. Look into Skyview, I wrote in an encrypted email. Carter's cutting corners. I included documents Greg had obtained, nothing traceable to me. Claire took the bait, and within days, I saw her poking around online, asking questions on X about Skyview's funding. Next, I targeted Michael's social circle. He thrived on connections, on being the man everyone wanted to know. I created fake profiles on X and LinkedIn, posing as disgruntled former partners or clients. I posted vague but damning comments about his ethics, his reliability. Carter's all flash, no substance. One post read, "Ask him about the Riverside deal." I seeded rumors, subtle enough to avoid suspicion but sharp enough to sting. I knew his type, paranoid, image-obsessed. Even a whisper of doubt could unsettle him. Sure enough, Greg reported that Michael was tense, snapping at his assistant, checking his phone obsessively. The seeds were taking root. For Emily, the approach was different. I didn't want to destroy her outright. She was still my wife, Lily's mother. But I needed her to feel the ground shift beneath her. I started small, planting doubts about Michael. One evening, I casually mentioned a news article about Skyview's troubles, watching her reaction. "Sounds like that Carter guy's in over his head," I said, my tone neutral. She stiffened, her fork pausing midair, but she recovered quickly, saying, "Oh, I hadn't heard." Her voice was too light, her eyes avoiding mine. I kept going, dropping hints about Michael's reputation, his past. "Heard he's got a temper," I said another time. "Not the kind of guy you'd want to cross." Each comment was a pebble, tossed into the calm of her secret world, creating ripples. I also started reclaiming my place in her life, subtly but deliberately. I suggested date nights, cooked her favorite meals, left notes like she used to do for me. I wanted her to remember what we had, to feel the contrast between our life and whatever fantasy she was chasing. Sometimes, I'd catch her looking at me, her expression soft, almost regretful. But then her phone would buzz, and she'd slip away again, back to him. It infuriated me, but it also strengthened my resolve. She'd chosen this path, and I'd make sure it led to ruin. The cruelest part of my plan was for both of them, a trap that would expose their affair in the most humiliating way possible. I learned from Greg that Michael was hosting a gala for Skyview's investors, a lavish event at a downtown ballroom. Emily had mentioned she was attending, claiming it was for work. I saw my opportunity. I contacted Claire, the journalist, and tipped her off about the gala. Carter's whining and dining investors while Skyview's falling apart. I wrote, might be worth crashing. I knew Claire's presence would rattle Michael, but that was only part of it. I also arranged for a delivery to the gala, a package addressed to Michael, containing copies of Greg's photos, the ones of him and Emily. The package would arrive during the event, with instructions to open it publicly, as a gift from a supporter. I imagined his face as he saw the images, the whispers spreading through the room. Emily's shock as her secret was laid bare. It would be their undoing, a spectacle of their own making. As the gala approached, I felt a strange calm. The plan was in motion, each piece falling into place. I was no longer the broken man who'd followed his wife to a coffee shop. I was something else, something colder, more focused. But there were moments when doubt crept in. I'd look at Lily, her crayons scattered across the kitchen table, and wonder if I was going too far. I'd see Emily asleep beside me, her face peaceful, and feel a pang of love, buried but not gone. Could I rebuild with her after this? Did I even want to? The questions haunted me, but they didn't stop me. The betrayal was too deep, the pain too raw. They'd made their choices, and now they'd face mine. The night before the gala, I sat in my garage. The Mustang's hood open, tools scattered around me. I wasn't working on the car. I was thinking, planning, preparing. The photos, the journalist, the rumors, they were all in place. Tomorrow, Michael and Emily would walk into my trap, unaware of the storm waiting for them. I felt no joy, only a grim satisfaction. Revenge wasn't about feeling good. It was about justice, about balancing the scales. And I was ready to tip them. The night of the gala arrived like a storm I'd summoned but couldn't control. I sat in my office, the house quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and Lily's soft snores upstairs. Emily had left hours earlier, her heels clicking on the hardwood as she called out, "Don't wait up. It's a work thing." Her voice was light, practiced, but I caught the nervous edge, the way her fingers lingered on her purse. She wore a black dress, elegant but not flashy. Her hair swept up in a way that made her look younger, untouchable. I nodded, kissed her cheek, and said, "Have fun." The words tasted like ash, but I smiled, knowing what was coming. Tonight, the carefully laid pieces of my plan would fall into place, and Emily and Michael would face the consequences of their betrayal. I didn't go to the gala, couldn't. Seeing them together, laughing among the glittering crowd, would have broken my resolve. Instead, I waited, my phone on the desk, Greg's number on speed dial. He was my eyes and ears, stationed discreetly outside the downtown ballroom where Michael's Skyview Gala was unfolding. Claire, the journalist, was already inside, her press pass granting her access to the polished world of investors and power brokers. I'd made sure she'd be there, her curiosity piqued by my anonymous tips about Skyview's shady dealings. The package, the one containing Greg's photos of Emily and Michael, was en route, delivered by a courier I'd paid in cash to ensure anonymity. It was labeled as a gift from a supporter, with instructions to open it during Michael's speech. Everything was set, a machine I'd built now running on its own. The waiting was torture. I paced the house, my footsteps heavy on the floorboards. I poured a whiskey but didn't drink it, the glass sweating in my hand. My mind raced, imagining the scene. Michael at the podium, his charming smile faltering as he opened the package. The photos spilling out. Emily's face in the crowd, her world collapsing. I pictured the whispers, the gasps, the investors' raised eyebrows as they realized the man they trusted was a fraud in more ways than one. I imagined Emily's shock, her shame, the realization that her secret was no longer hers. The thought brought no joy, only a cold satisfaction, like the click of a lock sealing their fate. Greg called at 9:17 p.m. "It's done," he said, his voice gruff. The package was delivered. Carter opened it mid-speech, "Just like you wanted." My heart thudded. "What happened?" I asked, gripping the phone. Greg described the scene. Michael, confident at first, thanking the crowd for their support, then pausing as he opened the envelope. His face went pale, his hands trembling as he saw the photos. Emily and him at the Willow Inn, in his car at the cafe. The images were projected on a screen behind him, a technical glitch I hadn't planned but welcomed. The crowd murmured, some laughing nervously, others whispering. Emily, standing near the front, froze, her face a mask of horror. Michael tried to recover, stammering about a misunderstanding. But the damage was done. Claire was there, snapping photos, asking pointed questions about Skyview and now, about Michael's personal conduct. The investors, already wary from Claire's earlier articles, began to pull away, their trust in Michael eroding. Emily left in a hurry, Greg added. Carter's still there, trying to salvage things. But it's a mess. You got what you wanted. I thanked him, hung up, and sat in silence. The plan had worked, but the victory felt hollow. I'd exposed them, humiliated them, but the pain in my chest hadn't eased. If anything, it was sharper, laced with the realization that this wasn't the end. Emily would come home soon, and I'd have to face her, to see the fallout in her eyes. She walked in just after midnight, her makeup smudged, her dress wrinkled. She didn't look at me, just dropped her purse on the counter and poured a glass of water with shaking hands. "You're up?" she said, her voice flat, like she was trying to keep it together. I stood in the doorway, my arms crossed, my heart a drumbeat. "How was the gala?" I asked, my tone calm but edged with ice. She flinched, her fingers tightening around the glass. "It was fine," she lied, but her voice cracked. She knew I knew. The air between us was thick, electric with unspoken truths. I stepped closer, my eyes locked on hers. "Don't," I said softly. "Don't lie to me anymore." Her face crumpled, and she set the glass down, her shoulders slumping. "David, she started, but I cut her off. "I know about Michael," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. "I've known for weeks. The hotel, the cafe, the park. I have photos, Emily. I saw everything." Her eyes widened, tears spilling over, but she didn't deny it. She just stood there, silent, her guilt laid bare. "Why?" I asked, the question I'd been carrying for months. "What did he give you that I couldn't?" She shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. "It wasn't about you," she said. "It was, I don't know. He made me feel seen, alive. I got lost in it." Her words were a knife twisting deeper. "Lost," I repeated, my voice rising. "You threw us away, Emily. You threw Lily away." At Lily's name, she sobbed, covering her face. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I love you, David. I love Lily. I made a mistake." A mistake. The word infuriated me. A mistake was forgetting to pay a bill, not betraying your family for months. But I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The gala had done my shouting for me. "You're going to lose everything," I said quietly. "Michael's finished. His investors are pulling out, his reputation's in tatters. And you'll have to live with what you've done." She looked at me, her eyes searching, as if realizing for the first time what I was capable of. "You did this?" she whispered. Not a question but a statement. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The days that followed were a slow unraveling. Emily moved to the guest room, her presence in the house a ghost of what it used to be. She tried to talk to me, to apologize, but I shut her out. Not out of anger, but because I needed space to think, to decide what came next. Lily sensed the tension, asking why Mommy was sad, why we weren't eating together anymore. I lied to her, said we were just busy, but it broke my heart to see her confusion. I wanted to protect her, to shield her from the truth, but I knew it was only a matter of time before the cracks showed. Michael's downfall was swift. Claire's article hit the next morning, a scathing piece about Skyview's financial troubles, laced with hints about his questionable personal conduct. The photos from the gala circulated on X, anonymous accounts amplifying the scandal. Investors pulled funding, and within a week, Skyview was on the brink of collapse. Michael's polished facade crumbled, his name now synonymous with failure and infidelity. I watched from a distance, following the news, reading the posts. I felt no pity, only the cold satisfaction of justice served. But Emily's punishment was harder to bear. She was a wreck, her confidence shattered, her social circle shrinking as word of the affair spread. Friends from her book club stopped calling, their silence a judgment. She tried to reach out to Michael, but he was too busy salvaging his own life to care about hers. I saw her pain, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to rebuild what we'd had. But the betrayal was too deep, the trust too broken. I couldn't unsee the photos, unhear her excuses. She'd chosen him over us, and no apology could erase that. I met with a lawyer quietly to discuss my options. Divorce was on the table, but I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. Not because I still loved her, though I did in some broken way, but because of Lily. I couldn't bear the thought of her growing up in a fractured home, shuttling between parents. But staying with Emily felt impossible, too. I was caught, trapped between love and hate, duty and rage. The revenge had worked, but it hadn't healed me. If anything, it had left me emptier, the satisfaction fleeting. I'd torn down their world, but mine was still in pieces. One night, as I sat in the garage, the Mustang's engine gleaming under the fluorescent light, I realized the truth. Revenge hadn't balanced the scales. It had only made them heavier. I'd hurt them, yes, but I'd also hurt myself and maybe Lily, too. The question now was what to do next, whether to rebuild, to walk away, or to keep punishing them until there was nothing left. I looked at the whiskey bottle on the workbench, unopened since the night of the gala. I picked it up, turned it in my hands, and then set it down. I didn't need it. I needed clarity, a path forward. For Lily, for myself, maybe even for Emily. The storm I'd summoned was over, but the wreckage remained, and I had to decide how to live in it.